Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue bringing you the story of Hoài and Hùng. In the previous episode, after escaping from the cave and returning home, Hoài gradually recovered under Hung's devoted care. In the early days, she could barely do anything but lie still on the simple wooden bed, the pain in her leg still throbbing whenever the weather changed or she moved too much. Hùng stayed by her side almost all day, personally brewing herbal medicine, changing bandages, and helping her sit up each morning, every movement careful, as if even the smallest mistake might worsen her injury. Life in the small house in the forest slowed down as a result, flowing in a quiet rhythm where every breath and every motion carried caution and unspoken care. Though her body was still weak, Hoài could not put out of her mind the reason she had been injured. During clearer moments, she repeatedly spoke of the poor young woman suffering from a serious illness whom she had tried to help. Each time Hoài mentioned it, the remorse in her eyes remained unchanged, as if the pain in her leg had never been as heavy as the worry in her heart. Hùng listened to everything without interrupting, silently remembering every detail. He understood that for Hoài, this was not merely an accident, but the consequence of a choice born of compassion, a choice she had never regretted. Meanwhile, life in the forest slowly returned to its familiar routine. The elderly woman lit the stove each morning as usual, the scent of smoke mingling gently with the aroma of herbal medicine in the air. Familiar footsteps on the damp ground, birds calling to one another in the treetops, all of it created a fragile sense of peace, as though the turmoil had only just receded. Yet within that quiet calm, another danger was silently approaching, slow but inevitable, like a lengthening shadow no one in the house could clearly see. Hùng understood all too well that as long as his mother's debt remained unresolved, the family could never truly be at peace. That worry was never spoken aloud, but it showed in the moments when he stared pensively into the forest, and in the sleepless nights spent beside Hoài bed after everyone else had fallen asleep. He knew the current calm was only temporary, and that at any moment, the past could return, bringing with it troubles that had never been settled. In this episode, the story reaches a climax when the lone shark manages to track down the place where Hung's mother is hiding. Without needing many clues, through relentless pursuit and cold calculation, he finds his way to the small forest house of the kind elderly woman. There, Hung's mother lies weak on a simple bamboo bed, her body visibly thinner, her breathing heavy after a series of hardships she has not yet recovered from. Each time she shifts, she winces in pain, her eyes half closed as if trapped in constant exhaustion. His arrival completely shatters the already fragile atmosphere. The sound of his rough footsteps on the dirt floor and his harsh voice cutting through the quiet make everyone freeze. Seeing the scene before him, the lone shark shows no trace of pity, his rage only intensifies. His gaze sweeps over the frail body of the woman on the bamboo bed without the slightest flicker of compassion, revealing only naked greed and impatience. He spits out cruel threats, each word like a blade slicing through the cramped space of the house. He demands immediate repayment, regardless of the woman's condition, regardless of the fact that she barely has the strength to sit up. Every sentence he utters is heavy and merciless, leaving no room for sympathy or hesitation. When the elderly woman steps forward to stop him, desperately pleading for him to back down, the situation does not ease, it grows even more tense. Trembling, she positions herself in front of the bamboo bed, her voice hoarse with fear and helplessness. Yet the lone shark remains cold and unmoved. He brushes aside all pleas and even steps closer, his aggressive posture suggesting he is ready to resort to violence, making the air inside the small house feel suffocatingly tight. At the most dangerous moment, Hùng appeared. The instant he stepped into the small house in the forest, the scene before him cut into his heart like a blade. His mother lay there, frail on the old bamboo bed, her face pale with exhaustion and fear. The kind elderly woman stood trembling in front of her, using her own body to shield the woman who was barely holding on. Facing them was the lone shark, his eyes ferocious, his voice rough and threatening. All of these images collided in a single, fleeting moment, but it was enough to make every emotion Hùng had been suppressing for so long explode violently. The fear of losing his mother, the guilt over the years he had not been there for her, and the long-restrained anger fused together, surging like a fire that could no longer be extinguished. Hùng felt his heart pounding, his breath coming fast and hard, yet in his mind there was only one thought left: he could not retreat anymore. If he did not stand up today, if he was late once again, everything might spiral beyond control, leaving behind regrets that could never be undone. Without hesitation, Hùng strode forward and placed himself in front of his mother and the elderly woman. His back straightened, his gaze locked onto the lone shark, unflinching, unwavering. Hung's presence instantly changed the atmosphere inside the cramped house. He resolutely refused to let the man harm anyone further, his voice low but firm, carrying unmistakable determination. This was no longer a plea or a negotiation, it was a direct, uncompromising confrontation. The exchange of words quickly turned heated. The lone shark's harsh, provocative remarks only drove the tension higher. Hùng did not back down, every response he gave was solid and unyielding, making it clear he would no longer tolerate threats of any kind. The already narrow space seemed to compress further, every breath growing heavier. One small mistake, and everything could cross an irreversible line. Cornered and realizing that words would not subdue Hùng, the man suddenly pulled out a knife. The flash of metal and the dim light of the forest house made the situation instantly perilous. The elderly woman cried out in terror, while Hung's mother, weak as she was, tried in vain to lift herself. In that moment, the line between safety and tragedy became thinner than ever. The confrontation rapidly escalated into a violent fight. In the confined space, every step, every strike carried the weight of survival. The dull sounds of impact echoed as ragged breaths mixed with suffocating tension. Hùng had to dodge the blade while searching for a chance to close the distance, each movement demanding absolute focus and strength. A single delay could have led to irreversible consequences. Amid the chaos, Hùng no longer thought about pain or danger to himself. All that remained in his mind was the image of his mother lying weak behind him, and the elderly woman trembling in fear. Those images fueled his strength and resolve. He poured all his will and courage into subduing his opponent, steadily forcing the man back and denying him any chance to strike again. After a breathless struggle, when both were already exhausted, Hùng seized a rare opening. Gathering every ounce of strength he had left, he knocked the knife from the lone shark's hand and swiftly pinned him to the ground. The cold clatter of metal hitting the floor rang out like a final punctuation mark to the immediate threat. In that moment, the tension enveloping the house finally broke, leaving behind a heavy but meaningful silence. Hùng stood there, breathing hard, sweat soaking through his shirt, his eyes never leaving his opponent until he was certain the danger was fully under control. The immediate threat had finally been ended, but the aftermath of the confrontation lingered, quietly spreading through the small forest house, an unspoken sign that the trials ahead were still far from over. Just as Hung's anger reached its peak, Hoài appeared and witnessed everything. She froze at the doorway of the forest house, her breath catching as the chaotic scene before her had yet to settle. The lone shark was pinned to the ground, breathing heavily, while Hung stood rigid, his entire body tense, his fists clenched so tightly they had turned white, his eyes still burning with unrestrained fury. One more moment, and everything could cross a line no one would be able to stop. Hoài clearly sensed the danger hanging thick in the air. Though her leg was still in pain and every step weighed heavily on her, she forced herself to move faster, ignoring the sharp ache spreading through her body. Her heart pounded not only from fear, but from worry for Hung. She understood all too well that if he let anger take control, he could lose himself, and lose everything he had struggled so hard to protect. Hoài spoke up. Her voice trembled at first from tension, but the more she spoke, the more she fought to steady herself. She called Hung's name, urged him to look at what was happening, reminded him that his mother was still behind him, that the elderly woman was trembling in fear. She told him that violence was not the way out, that if he went too far now, everything would only become worse, not just for the man before him, but for himself and his family. Her words were not accusations, nor commands. They were born of genuine concern, a plea grounded in understanding and deep connection. Hoài reminded Hung how long he had fought to pull his mother out of danger, how patient he had been in trying to preserve a chance at peace for his family. If he allowed anger to dominate today, all of that effort could vanish in an instant. In that moment, Hung was torn between two opposing forces. On one side was the still blazing rage, the instinct to punish the man who had driven his mother to the brink. On the other was Hoài voice, the fragile but present thread of reason, reminding him of the consequences of every choice. Hung's gaze wavered, his heavy breathing gradually slowed, and his clenched hands began to tremble, as if he were struggling with himself. A brief silence enveloped the forest house. No one spoke, yet every second that passed felt suffocatingly tense. Hung lowered his head and closed his eyes for a moment, as if forcing himself to stop before everything went too far. Hoài words, though softly spoken, carried enough weight to pull him back to what remained of his reason after the emotional explosion. After that intense inner struggle, Hung slowly released his grip. The movement was deliberate and firm, like a choice made with everything he still had control over. The anger did not disappear entirely, but it was restrained, giving way to the clarity he needed. Hung stepped back, putting distance between himself and the man on the ground. His gaze was no longer wild with loss of control, but cold and vigilant. He chose to call the police. The decision was not easy, his resentment and turmoil still burned inside him. But he understood that handing the lone shark over to the law was the only way to end the threat without turning himself into a criminal. It was not just a choice for himself, but one made to protect his mother, protect Hoài, and preserve the path he was still trying to walk. As the call was made, the atmosphere in the forest house slowly eased, though traces of tension remained. Hoài let out a quiet breath of relief, sensing that a dangerous boundary had just been held. Hung stood there in silence, as if he had just fought a battle not only with another man, but with himself. And in that moment, his choice opened a different path forward, fragile, yet necessary, for whatever still awaited them ahead. Hung's mother was finally safe. After a series of tense moments that had seemed to leave no way out, the woman was still there, lying quietly on the old bamboo bed, her breathing weak but steadier now. The fear that had clung to her for so long seemed to have just been lifted, leaving on her gaunt face a deep exhaustion mixed with a sense of relief she had not felt in a very long time. The kind elderly woman, who had silently sheltered and protected her, no longer had to live in constant dread each day. The small house in the forest, after so many upheavals, temporarily returned to its familiar quiet, though that quiet remained fragile and easily broken. Hung's family, at least for this moment, had escaped a prolonged nightmare. There were no more threats, no more ferocious stares haunting every corner of the house, no more constant unease whenever night fell. A calm settled over the space, seeping into every breath and every slow movement. Hoài sat silently by the bedside, looking at Hung's mother with eyes heavy with thought, the echoes of what had just happened still lingering within her. The elderly woman quietly tidied the house, her hands still trembling, but the panic on her face had begun to fade. Yet that peace was not entirely complete. In Hung's quiet gaze, worry still flickered. He stood by the porch, looking out into the familiar forest, where a gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying a surface calm that also concealed many unknowns. What had just happened had not yet settled in his mind. Although the immediate danger had been resolved, and the source of so much fear had been handed over to the law, Hung understood clearly that everything was far from over. He knew that to truly protect his family, he would still have to face many challenges ahead. Old problems had not completely closed, and the consequences left behind still lingered in silence, waiting for another moment to surface. The responsibility on his shoulders was not only the courage shown in a single confrontation, but the endurance and clarity required over a long journey. That thought made Hung more pensive, more inward-looking, as if he were quietly preparing himself for what still lay ahead. Hoài noticed this. She did not speak, but in the way she looked at Hung there was silent understanding and shared resolve. She knew that the peace they now had was only a beginning, fragile, and something that would require great effort to protect. But at least, in this moment, they were still standing together, still had the chance to face what came next side by side, instead of being swept away by fear and helplessness as before. This episode closes in a rare calm after a series of relentless upheavals. There is no more fierce climax, only the necessary quiet spaces for each person to look back, to reflect, and to prepare for the next steps. Peace, though not yet whole, has begun to glimmer, just enough to light a fragile hope amid worries that have yet to fully fade. Stay tuned for the next episode to follow the next developments of the story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment to share your feelings about Hoài and Hung's journey.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình chuyên có cái thói quen là mình quay video, mình quay từ dưới lên nên người mình thì gầy mà lúc nào quay cũng thấy có nọng hết. Lấy cái chỗ này. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều vì đã luôn theo dõi và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhé. Đó, gần Tết là nó bắt đầu nó sẽ lên mụn như này về này mọi người này. Và bình thường là nó không sao, nó cứ gần Tết là nó bắt đầu bị cái này cái kia á mọi người. Tạm biệt mọi người.